Slate. This is Kelly Durham from the Northbrook Public Library.
Thanks, Kelly. Do we have a second?
This is Mary Ellen from the Niles, Maine. I second.
Thank you. Okay, so then we are all set for that. So then we can move into all of the stuff that's been happening lately. So our first topic is the migration that we just recently had with Grace Lake and Palatine. Looks like we have a survey for satisfaction on migration experience.
Okay. Deborah, I think you wanted to go ahead and give us an update on that and talk about the survey.
Sure, I would love to. Grace Lake and Palatine are now live in Polaris and in CCS. So they went live last Wednesday. So congrats, welcome. If there are any Grace Lake and Palatine staff here today, I'm not quite sure if I see anyone in the roster, but hopefully the migration went smoothly for everyone. Thank you for your patience, your flexibility during the offline period. So Kathleen has built a migration satisfaction survey that we wanted to share with the members. And Kathleen, can you go ahead? We'll pop that link into the chat so everyone has that handy. We're just looking for your general feedback on how the migration went for you and your department. So any insight and feedback you can share will be helpful for future migration projects. So I will clarify, we do not have any on the radar right now. So we aren't working with any more libraries at the moment, but it still is helpful for us to hear that feedback just in case we have some more libraries joining sometime in the next few years. We'll be able to improve the experience for all of our members next time around. And that was my spiel. We do still have, as I'm sure many of you know, the migration work doesn't necessarily end on go live day. That's really when a lot of the work begins for our new libraries, especially. We are still working through some data issues, particularly deduplication of patron and bibliographic records. So when the Palatine and Grace Lake data were loaded into our database, we have over 4,000 duplicate patron accounts that resulted from that data load. We've so far merged over 3,000, so we have about 600 patrons left with duplicate accounts. We are working to get those resolved as soon as possible because it does cause issues for patrons when trying to log into the catalog. They can only log into one of their accounts at a time, so they might not see all of their checkouts linked in the same account. So we are anticipating we'd be finished with that patron merge by like next Tuesday. So thank you to all of you who have reported duplicate patron accounts for us to merge and prioritize. But again, we hope to be finished with the remainder of those by next week. Kathleen, anything you wanted to say about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Becky.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say there's some good questions in the chat that were just coming up. Kathleen, I don't know if you want to.
Sure, yeah, I can respond in there, but just if someone doesn't have the chat open, I've dropped the link in there, and then somebody had asked, do you want just one person from each library to complete the survey? And the answer is no, as many staff as possible. So, you know, if we hear from 20 people at Niles or 14 at Glencoe, like that's a-okay. We want to hear from as many staff as possible, so you can let us know what went well for you, what could have been better, and just overall satisfaction and how you felt the day of. So.
Yeah, and it's really helpful. Again, share with your colleagues as well. We'd like representation from different departments because staff in different departments are impacted in different ways by the offline period and the go live. So please encourage your colleagues as well to complete the survey. We've already gotten some really good feedback that we can definitely use to, again, improve the experience moving forward. So encourage your team, encourage your coworkers to fill it out. We'd like as many responses as we can get.
Okay, all right, so I think we've talked enough about the survey. We can go ahead and move on to the next update. So we just wanted to call attention to online training courses that we had created, just so staff know that they're available. So if you're onboarding anyone, Glencoe, we have 2 employees. So if you have so many people you bring on board, you can use this for staff training, but it's also a good refresher as well. This sort of came out of the need to do remote online training for Grace Lake and Palatine. So what it looks like is this, and you might have seen it already, so just bear with me if you have. what it is it's an online training portal that contains all of the different training topics that you might want to use to get staff acquainted with the different resources that we have. So, if you're new to reports or perhaps you need a refresher on using SmartPay in the PAC, you can click on any of these and they'll take you to an interactive class featuring videos and activities. And the idea is it gets you really comfortable with the course that you're taking and those different materials. So that lives here. The other places that you can find it, because I know sometimes we talk about resources, but making them findable is the difficult part. The learning portal. My dog is very loud and very excited. From the learning portal, you can go ahead and access it from, come on, move, my friend. You can access it underneath training, under online training courses, so very easily through the portal. The other place that you can access this from is through the CCS website. So on our website, I think everybody's pretty used to seeing the learning portal here. You'll see underneath that there's now a link for online training courses. So 2 different places. So whether you're on the learning portal or on the website, really easy to find. So we've got a lot of materials in a lot of different places sometimes, so it's good to make it accessible. And then everything's just organized by different tracks. The other thing that you'll see here is a course evaluation form. So if you've taken one of these courses or you have a staff member that does, we really appreciate you taking the time to evaluate the course. Again, a lot like the migration, we want to be the best we can be and develop the best types of courses. So completing an evaluation when you're done is really helpful for us to keep the courses up to date, and also to let us know like what's working and what's not. So just that and drawing attention to it.
Yeah, and I will say CCS has never done virtual training before or online training, so again, we really appreciate any feedback that you might share, either like this is working great for us, or hey, you left out this really important thing in this training module, or this activity didn't really work well for me. So any feedback that you have, we really appreciate it. And if you have suggestions, again, for additional modules that we haven't created, now that Go Live is passed, we should have more time to go back and update the courses we've created, and then again, create some additional content as well. So all your feedback, we'd really appreciate it.
I can tell you the 2 staff members I have working on those things say they're really good. So they're following them easily and they like the little tests that are interspersed in there. So well done.
Great.
Hooray, thank you.
Happy to hear it. That's good. Okay, let's see. All right, so the next thing on here, Becky, I'm sorry, I'm like running through the agenda. I should let you introduce each one of these. So CCS is going to be redesigning its website. So as you saw from the screenshots I just shared with you, we have a lot of information in a lot of different places, right? We've got the learning portal, the training portal, the CCS website, your catalog, where you have the wiki. It's a lot of info in a lot of places. So I'm working on an RFP right now that will go out hopefully, hoping for the end of 2020. And we'll solicit some feedback in order to develop a new website. So what we did in April is when we had all that time when everyone was closed and like in various states of chaos, is we did some remote usability testing, and we also did some card sorts. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what that usability testing and user testing was and how it relates to the website redesign. So I'll just show you a quick snippet of what we did and then talk about how that relates to the website redesign. So one of the things we did was a card sort. And with this, in the newsletter, we had gone ahead and asked folks to volunteer. So we heard from a lot of library staff from various departments, and they went ahead and performed a card sort. And I'll talk about what that is in just a moment here. I want to give you an idea of the types of research and user testing we've done. So, okay. So one of the things that can be the hardest when you're developing a new website is creating that header that lives at the top of your website. I'm sure anyone who's done a library website redesign or even tried to organize content online knows it can be difficult to decide what goes where. And if you're too close to the project and too close to the vocabulary, sometimes figuring out how your users want to describe things can be a little bit difficult. So what we did is we went ahead and took a look at the headers that we have currently. So we've got the learning portal headers, and then on the CCS website, we've got headers on the left and headers on the right, and they even change when you log in to make things a little bit more confusing. But two distinct websites with lots of headers meant that we had a lot of content we needed to shuffle the deck on and to figure out how to get that organized. So the way that we did that is we developed some study goals. So the idea is we wanted to understand our users, meaning our library staff, prefer the structure of the websites and how to accommodate differences in how a cataloger versus a public services versus a youth services versus a circ staff might organize that different content. And we ultimately wanted to figure out how to combine the learning portal and CCS website headers into something that made a lot of sense. And ultimately, this would help us develop a configuration for the architecture of the website redesign. So the way that we did this is we created something called a card sort. So what a card sort is a series of cards that represent common tasks and information sought on our website. So for example, you might have a card that said advisory board, or one that says pass, or one that says cataloger's wiki, or perhaps you have one that says online training. And the idea is we took 30 cards and we had people organize all of these different cards into categories. Participants were also able to name the categories. So for example, if I threw everything related to continuing education into one bucket, that might be my card sort, but somebody else might call that training, somebody else might call that learning. So the idea is to figure out what content and vocabulary is the most common for everyone to use, and then you use that to create your header. And we completed this activity with a tool called Optimal Workshop. I can show you what that looked like. And if some of you participated, this is going to look really familiar. So let me just load this guy up. This is just a short demo of what the card sort looks like. I think talking about it is really nice, but being able to see what the actual card sort looks like in action gives you a much better idea of what the of what a card sort actually looks like. We can pop back over to that later, that's fine. Okay, so as far as the participants that we had 37 participants from across library departments. So everybody from circulation to digital services, to directors, to I mean, really just a little bit of everything. And the idea is we had 5 groups with 6 to 9 participants per groups, and the average number of categories they created was 6, with the minimum number being 5 and the most being 7. But it really helped us figure out how to organize our content. So we took all of this content, we turned it into something called a dendrogram, which I'll show you in a moment. But the idea is with a dendrogram, we want 60% or more of our users to agree on how something's grouped. And then that's an indication of how we might want to group our content. So I'll show you what that looks like. So in this dendrogram here, here's what we're looking at. So everything to the right of 60%, that might be a way that we want to group content together. So you'll see, for example, here we've got all of the advisory group, board meetings, and board meeting dates all grouped together in the same kind of color here. And then things to do with like a member directory, member library information, about us, basically those CCS kind of about us things, those got grouped together in the same way. But the idea is each of these sort of acts like a funnel to show how that content might be grouped together. And we did that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times. And then what we did is we took all of those dendrograms and shuffled those together to look at what might be a proposed header. It doesn't mean that the content is going to look exactly like this, but this is a potential way we might organize that header. So the idea is we wanted to take a look at how our library staff view our content and how they group it together in order to create a header that makes the most sense. All right, let's see if my demo wanted to load. All right, let me give it one quick go and see if that works. If it doesn't want to work, we'll go ahead and just move on. I don't want to take up all of our time with the demo, but I think it's interesting and hopefully you will too. I kind of love-hate that there's an actual countdown of the number of seconds that it downloads. It makes it very anticipatory.
think Grace really wants to join this meeting.
I'm sorry, my dog is very excited. She's even like in another room with a toy, so she like wouldn't bark during our meeting, but that doesn't seem to be the case. All right, let me go ahead and try this GIF real quick and see if it'll play for us. If not, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to something else because I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to take up all of our time. All right, that's fine. That guy's not interested in being a part of the presentation. All right, but just to give you an idea, all of these different topics that you see listed here, each of those is represented as a card, as I mentioned. So you can even think of it as being written out on a note card in front of you. Then our participants group things together. Essentially, they stack the deck. Once they've grouped things together in a way that makes sense, they're able to give it a label with whatever they want. And the interesting piece about it is that you'll see that different users create the same types of labels. So the word meetings, the word learn, the word login, those were used again and again and again. So within the card sort, when you see the same vocabulary show up again and again, kind of like you would tag images, that becomes a shared vocabulary that you use to create that header. So that is ultimately what we did. So I'll go ahead and back out of here. And then in addition to the card sort, we also did some remote usability testing with 5 library staff members. So with those folks, we went ahead and gave them, I think, 5 to 7 common tasks that people try to complete using the portal. So we had them search for different types of learning activities. So, you know, find something about making a record set. How would you locate web reports, that type of a thing. Then we charted how they moved through our website. And to quote Deborah's words, it was very painful because as you watch people use a tool that you've created, you find those, what we call pain points, and it becomes really easy to determine what's difficult and what needs to be reorganized so that the site is navigable and it's as easy as it can be to use. So we took all of that feedback from library staff and we'll use that in the creation of that RFP. So the idea is we wanted to keep the things that worked really well and we wanted to eliminate the parts of navigation and usability that were difficult so that in the new website, the things that are good stay in place and the things that are bad are worked out of the site going forward. So, okay. Great, so I'll go ahead and let Becky introduce this next topic then.
So our next agenda item comes to us from Cam. It looks like the Library of Congress genre form terms has established a new heading, Novels of Manners. And CCS is still using Regency fiction as a local subject heading. So Cam has discussed whether or not CCS should use one or both headings on records. The group decided to take this question to PAS so we can discuss it further, whether or not we think we should be Regency fiction or Novels of Manners, or both.
Okay. And then I know that I was talking to Lynn earlier, so I see that you unmuted yourself, so it looks like you're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and just open up your presentation, and then when you're ready for me to go ahead and move to that next slide, just say next, and I'll go ahead and take care of that.
Fabulous, thank you.
Of course.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Lynn Rubio from Des Plaines Public Library, and here to help me out also is Sandra DeCio from Indian Trails. Is that true? I hope so. And that's, my background is in reader services. So Sandra is going to help me with any cataloging questions that you might have. I promise to make this brief, but thanks for making time for it. And we want to talk about the difference between Regency fiction and novels of manners, how they're used as genre headings in the catalog, and how patrons search for them. Next, please. So GSAFD describes Regency fiction as historical works set during the late 18th and early 19th century, up to the reign of Queen Victoria. LCGFT describes novels of manners as realistic fiction that describes in detail the customs, habits, values, and expectations of a particular society. A lot of Regency novels are also novels of manners because it's a popular style for works set in that period. But as you can see in my very fancy Venn diagram, not all Regency fiction are novels of manners, and not all novels of manners are Regency fiction. The kind of classic Regency fiction / novel of manners would be by Georgette Hare or Jane Austen, and that's like in the middle, that Powder and Patch. But there's Regency fiction. There's a lot of romance. This is a mystery, and then there are novels of manners that are set in other places, like The Women in Black is set in Australia during the 20th century. So so what? Next, please. Why does it matter? Well, LCGFT doesn't recognize Regency fiction as a genre heading. It recognizes novels of manners. And CCS catalogers have used the GSFAD genre heading Regency fiction as a local heading. We'd like to use both headings when appropriate. And one of the things we talked about at the meeting was that keeping the Regency fiction genre heading as a locally used heading is important, because readers who like Regency fiction, and a great example of this would be romance readers who their niche is Regency romance, will probably use the word Regency when they search or browse rather than typing in novels of manners. Using both when appropriate and using the C also instead of the C reference should make for an accurate return of search results and an accurate browse. And that's what we're going for people to be able to find what they're looking for in the best way possible. Next. Okay, so here's what it looks like in the catalog. These are from the same books that were in my fancy Venn diagram. And you can see that the Georgette Hare book has the genre headings that are both Regency fiction and novel of manners. So whether you typed in one or the other to search, you're going to find it. And then you can see the browse headings when you search, when you browse Regency fiction, novels of manners also comes up. When you browse novels of manners, Regency fiction also comes up as a C also. So that continues to leave those doors open for people to find. So the long and the short of it is we'd like to keep using both genre headings where appropriate. Any questions? Or comments or feelings?
Thanks, Lynn. That was great. Now I want to read all those books. So, does anybody have any feedback for Cam on whether or not they should continue to use both subject headings, one subject heading?
So Lynn and Sandy, is the feedback Scrap is looking for, and I went to that Scrap meeting, but it was a long time ago, is just like confirmation from this group that we want to keep using the local Regency fiction heading for patrons, even though the actual official heading is novels of manners?
That's correct.
Okay.
We want the recognized heading to be there because that is the official one, but we want to keep using the local heading because we really believe that patrons are more likely to use Regency when they're searching.
It would
So I don't know if you can see in the chat, but it looks like absolutely everyone is saying yes, yes, use both. Please use both. Definitely both. So I
For
think
a
that
lot
you've
of
got a
us,
lot of support.
For a lot of us, the issue was getting the word Regency into the record, because having these cross references in the browse heading is great, but we don't know how many people actually use browse versus keyword. And the only other way to get the word Regency into the record is the actual subject heading for the Regency period, but that only covers 1811 to 1820, or the time that the Prince of Wales was acting as regent for George III, which is, that 9-year period does not even cover a tiny little bit of the actual setting of Regency novels.
Exactly. Yay.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, looking in the comments here, it's overwhelming support that it's a good idea. Makes sense to keep both. Very logical. So sounds like PASS very much endorses this idea. So okay.
Great. Thank you very much for having us.
Sure. Thank you for presenting and sharing and putting this together for us, explaining it. I really appreciate it. Okay. So before we move on to number 5, I mistakenly skipped over 2 notices that I wanted to share, pass along to PASS from the Circin ILL advisory group. So let me go ahead and walk through those real quick. So they were really just reminders. So CIRC and ILL wanted to remind us that when placing requests for a book club, they want staff to add the date of the book discussion to the staff display note field. This helps other staff to plan out discussion schedules. So let me go ahead and open the example. I think reading that, it sounds very technical, but seeing it on screen makes it a lot easier to understand. Okay, great. So in this example, let's say I'm doing a book discussion, and our book is A Gentleman in Moscow. If I go ahead and place the multiple holds for my book discussion card, when I place the multiple holds, there is a field here that says staff display notes. So ILL and CIRC is asking that you put in the book discussion date there. So on this next screen, here would just be an example. So you might say something like, for Algonquin Fiction Book Club, scheduled for October 31st, and then the date and your initials. But that just lets folks know that that this is being used for book discussion, so that we're not all reading the same book at the same time. Okay, and then you can see all of those are placed at one time. So that was our first reminder. The second thing that they wanted us to pass along was that there is a web report called Item Holds, and that will go ahead and bring up item level holds that should have been placed at the bid level. So I think the real reminder is to not place item level holds if you don't need to. But if you wanted to see what item level holds are in place at your library that don't need to be, here's how you can find that list. Okay, so from the CCS website, in the lower left corner, you can see that there's an option for web reports. From the portal, you would access that under content and then web reports. You can access it from either place. Once web reports opens and you log in,
Hello there. I'm multitasking.
Yeah.
I'm muted, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there's a question. Okay. Under patron management, there is a report called Item Holds. Clicking that will allow you to download a list of item holds that have been placed at your location that perhaps should have been bid level holds. Are there any questions about those reminders?
I will just note that patrons cannot place item level holds from the catalog. So primarily, item level holds are obviously being placed by staff in either LEAP or the client. So we totally understand if you need to place an item level hold to get a specific item back, for example, because it needs to go to repair, or you need that specific item for a book club. But in general, for patrons and for personal use for staff cards, you should be placing bib level holds rather than item level holds. So that report is just a handy way to identify items that might have been placed on hold on accident, and those can then be converted to a title or bib level hold.
I have a question about this. Does that list all the item level holds that have been placed, and then you make that decision yourself, or is there some metric like that puts something in that list? I'm not sure.
That one does list all of the item level holds. And let me just pull up, I just want to take a quick look to see how it's laid out. All right, I'm going to pull up an example here. So this report is listed into two tabs. One tab contains item level holds placed for your patrons, and then the other contains item level holds placed on your items. So we have found that sometimes staff place item level holds on another library's items, which can be a bit of an issue for that library. And then again, the other tab would identify item level holds placed for your patrons or patron accounts belonging to your branch. So you can go through them. And again, some of them are totally appropriate to be item level holds because it's a staff member placing an item level hold on a book that they need back for a specific reason. But some are just accidents where a staff member placed an item level hold for a patron that should have actually been placed as a bib level. So it does require staff to do a little bit of sleuthing to see, all right, this was an appropriate situation to place an item level hold, or, oh, this is for a patron. It'd be better to place it as a title level hold. That way there are more items that are eligible to fill their hold.
Okay, thanks. That answers my question.
There is one more question in the chat from Anne at Glencoe. She asks, does the report only contain unfilled item level holds? So are they all unfilled when the report is pulled up?
Yes, it's active holds. So it is not holds that have been filled. So it would be only holds that are still out there in the universe waiting to be filled.
Okay, and then we have another question from Tara at Lake Villa. She says, we have a super user, every library does, is very particular about items and asks for items for specific libraries at time, particular items and asks for items from specific libraries at times. We usually use an item level hold in this case. I think if somebody wants a specific item and they've made that clear, I think that's okay, but I think you can use the staff notes in that situation to specify, like, patron wants only this item, this wasn't a mistake. That way that doesn't accidentally get canceled, because otherwise it might look like a mistake. But that's a great time to use those staff notes that we demoed a moment ago when you place that hold.
It's interesting that you raised that question because we just came across and had to do a little staff re-education on item holds. We have more than one patron who says, well, I don't want your DVD because it's always scratched, so can you get it from somewhere else? And our answer at this point is no, because of the item holds, and just making sure that they know to let us know when things are coming back that didn't play or whatever. But I see that the staff is trying to accommodate patrons, but this could become kind of a mess.
Yeah, and it is, Pam, I think that's a really great strategy, just to say, tell the patron, to let you know if an item comes in that's damaged or scratched. That way staff can resolve that issue and request another item as needed. It is very difficult for ILL and circulation staff when doing the pick list to identify item level holds. So it is a bit of a hassle for those staff to identify item level holds. They have a specific barcode attached. So this is very difficult for ILL staff or circ staff who are managing the pick list. The more item level holds that there are, oftentimes they have to do some digging to try to find out where that specific copy is located within the library. So again, it's CCS policy to place bib level holds for patrons. So as much as possible, if you can make that a general practice, that's very helpful to the rest of the crew. And I would say that one thing that's great about Polaris is that regardless of where the item's coming from, that item will always check out at your location for whatever loan period. When I was previously worked at Swan Libraries, patrons wanted items from specific libraries because you could get a longer loan period depending on where it came from. So in CCS, regardless of where the item comes from, it's checked out for your library's local loan period. So that's one perk, that it really doesn't matter where the item's coming from, because the checkout policies of the library it's being checked out are what is being followed.
Okay, so I think we're We're good. I don't see any more questions or comments about this report or item level holds. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Becky, and we can go ahead and move on to the next section.
Okay, so our next agenda item is just kind of a general discussion about reopening our libraries to the public. We're all at various stages of doing that. Some of us have been doing it longer, some of us are just doing it. So just kind of anyone who's interested in sharing how they're going about doing that. How are you allowing patrons in? Are you asking them to register ahead of time? Are you just letting anybody come in whenever, like normal? Are you limiting the amount of time people can be in? How many people? Just kind of all of that kind of stuff. Anyone who would be willing to share their experience to help all the rest of us out.
Sure. This is Matt Golembeski from Prospect Heights. So our library is in kind of a weird situation because we're actually just about to undergo a huge reno and our building is going to be closed for 6 months. But up until last week when we closed, what we were doing is we didn't have any appointments to come into the building, but we did have a staff member by the door to check for masks and just to kind of remind patrons, like, you got to keep your mask on the whole time you're there. That means over your nose. We were handing out complimentary hand sanitizer to them. And then we were keeping a door count. We decided no more than 50 patrons in the building at a time would be good given our space. And we really never even came close to that. I think the most patrons we ever had in the building at once was 20. And that was like one crazy day. Most of the time it was like 7 people in the building at a time who were not staff. But we had somebody at the door using a little door counter, and we were counting both ins and outs so that we knew how many we had in the building at a time. We did limit the amount of time on the computers to 1 hour. So it kicked them out after an hour, and if they tried to leave and come back, they couldn't log in again that day with their card. So that was one thing that we limited. And then we just kind of tried to encourage patrons to not linger. We got rid of a lot of our comfy furniture to encourage them to not stick around. We moved a lot of the magazine. We got rid of the newspapers, and we moved a lot of the magazines around. And we allowed patrons to check out even the current issues of magazines so that they could just take them home. So that if we did have patrons who were sitting around with a stack of magazines, we could say, you can take all those home now. So, and that seemed to work pretty well. As I said, we kind of were lucky that we never really had to enforce the number of patrons in there. We never had to line people up or anything. So that was what we did with that. In terms of handling materials during patron browsing, we decided not to quarantine items that were being browsed, like having a card or something that said, like, if you touched it, please put it here. And I believe the thought process behind that was they don't do that at the grocery store. They don't do that at a lot of retail places. So we just kind of really encouraged everybody to wash their hands and before and after they touched things. And again, we were really encouraging people to not sit around and browse things, to take their items and go. So in terms of assisting patrons with the computers, that was a lot harder. We did install some remote software. So the idea could be that we could remote into their desktop and kind of chat with them, and then open the chat and talk to them on our chat thing. So we didn't have to shout across the library. But in practice, I feel like it didn't get used very often. So that was much more difficult to handle. But as I said, we are now closed to the public for the next 6 months, and we're only offering curbside and virtual and answering phones until April. So we're in kind of a weird situation.
Thanks, Meg. Does anybody else want to share their experiences with patrons back in the buildings?
Sorry. Ours is very similar. We're limiting attendance to 50 people in the building. We actually have an automatic door counter that counts people as they go in and out. We do have somebody in the front to check for masks. And if somebody has forgotten one, we have like little paper lunch sacks that have been quarantined that have adult and children size masks for people who forgot theirs. We
Sandra, do you
require
mind just
people,
saying what library you're from? Sorry.
oh, sorry, Indian Trails.
Thank you.
We require people who want to use the computers to register at least one day in advance. And they have to reserve the computer because we're not letting them use all of our computers at once. They're too close together. So we want people using computers to have social distancing between them. And it also gives computer services time to clean the keyboards and mice between patrons. So we just kind of like rotate them around. So that,
Sandra, there's a question in the chat. What automatic door counter are you using, if you know?
sorry, I don't remember the name of it.
That's okay.
But we moved all of our furniture into our group study rooms so that nobody can try to use the group study rooms or sit in the furniture for extended lengths of time. We're encouraging people to treat us like the grocery store, to come in and get what they want and then leave.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to share things that have been working, not working?
So I'm from Glencoe. We've been open since July 20th, and we have we're kind of split on how we do it. Patrons can come into the building. Children's is asking that people make appointments to go up to Children's, which allows them to actually maintain social distancing with the kids, which is a really difficult thing to do. But for the rest of the library, patrons come in, we have an automatic door count. I think our total patron number for the building is maybe 40. And correct me if I'm wrong on that number. And we have not even come close to it. So I'm not really worried about it. Staff on the first floor that are at the reference desk and the circulation desk are completely surrounded by plexiglass. We've completely enclosed those desks. Children's desk, the children's desk and the desk on the lower level have like standalone barriers that cover the desk. And the first floor staff is maintaining the, we're policing the masks for most of the library except for children's. We haven't had any problems with anybody really. Computer use is limited to an hour. We will give out guest passes. We've removed all of our furniture except for one chair in our reference room with the table, and the chairs are the computers. And we only have 4 computers that are up and available right now on the first floor. There are some available up in Children's. And we're doing a grab and go model. But what we have found is even with the furniture removed, people are sitting on the window ledges to browse the books. They will take a stack and put them on the window ledge and then sit on the ledge and use their books or look at the books. We are not quarantining books that have been browsed, but we have at this point turned off our resource sharing due to the Rail 7-day quarantine. We just don't have space to quarantine anything for 7 days. So we're working on that. Did I forget anything, Anne?
I don't think so. The only additional thing I'll say is that we are not circulating our children's kits right now.
That's right.
I know some libraries are, some libraries aren't. We're waiting for kind of the final realm studies as they continue to come out. And to be honest, it just makes it one less thing that we have to worry about.
Thanks very much. Does anybody else have anything they want to share that
this is
helpful?
Sure. This is Tara at Lake Villa, and most of it's the same as others, except that we did find we had to add tables up front because we have 7 computers available for public use for a 2-hour maximum, but a lot of people wanted to use the Wi-Fi. So we don't have study rooms right now. So we created tables up in our front area that are socially distanced from one another and allow one user a maximum of 2 hours a day, which is the same as the computers. And we started with 3, and I think we now have 5 or 6. They're very popular. So
We had patrons who wanted to use our Wi-Fi too. Our Wi-Fi is strong enough that people can use it while sitting in their cars, and also the gazebo in the park right next door. So we've been encouraging them to do that instead.
Sorry, I tried to unmute and didn't work. It looks like there's some questions in chat. Kathleen is pulling up a list of all the libraries that are currently loaning materials through CCS resource sharing. I don't know if she's going to share that or send it out. And then the other question we have is anyone else having issues with unaccompanied school children coming in to use the library as a school space? Oh, because of all the e-learning, yeah.
We had some concerns about that. So we sent out, or I don't know if it went out yet or not, this is at Highland Park, through the school district, a letter to parents explaining our policies and telling them they kind of had to make other arrangements. At Highland Park, we are asking people to make appointments. They're on the hour. The first one's at 11 and the last one's at 6, and they last 45 minutes. And then after 45 minutes, we clear the library and wipe everything down. Sometimes it feels like it takes longer than 45 minutes to explain this to people when we make the appointments. We haven't had too many groups of students of any ages coming in. Maybe they've gotten the Highland Park closed yesterday, Liz. We've been open since mid-July. Yesterday we closed because someone tested positive for COVID. Anyway, but before that, we had a limit of 40 people per 45-minute, and it was 40 people over the age of 2, even if it was a family. And only one time that I know of have we hit 40, which was last Sunday. And since we hadn't been hitting 40, we were letting people walk in. So of course on Sunday morning at 11, the first few people at the door were walk-ins, and I was there. So I just went out and told them they couldn't come in. They were not very happy about that, but the computer use is kind of problematic because the people that use our computers often need a lot of help. And I'm pretty sure everyone, other people's computer tech people have had this issue, like people who are used to coming in with their phone and having someone explain to them, close up how to use their phone. So if anyone has a solution for that, I'd appreciate hearing that. And we stopped allowing our magazines to circulate after one of the Realm studies showed a lengthier viability of the virus on glossy paper. So maybe we're the only library that does that, I don't know. And we also do grab and go for people who don't even want to come in the building for a brief visit.
Sorry.
Regarding Lisa's comment, Lisa, we require that all children under the age of 13, I'm Sally from Glenview, under the age of 13 be accompanied by an adult when they come in. That's different from our regular policy, but we feel that as long as they're with an adult, they'll socially distance. Though we have very limited seating, so they really couldn't come in to use it for school, I guess.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to share? Questions?
I'll just share a verbal update on the CCS libraries that aren't participating in intra-CCS lending. So we currently have 5 libraries that are not sending out their materials. It's Crystal Lake, Glencoe, Evanston, Lake Forest, and Northbrook. Evanston will begin participating in lending on Tuesday, though, so they just opted in this month. So there will be 4 libraries then that aren't ready yet to start sending out materials. So I'm going to pop that into the chat so you can read it. And I believe we have a post up on the learning portal as well. that lists out which libraries are participating, but it might be a bit out of date. So we'll update that and we'll share it in Friday's newsletter.
Thanks very much, Deborah. Okay, does anybody have anything else that they want to share? Questions? I can't see everybody, so I don't necessarily know if anybody's getting ready to talk. I don't want to accidentally move ahead.
Hi, this is Jason from Fox River Valley. I'm just curious if any of the other libraries present are continuing with one-on-one appointments, one-on-one tech appointments, or one-on-one librarian appointments via Zoom or over the phone. It's a thing that we've been doing since we reopened, but we haven't had a lot of patron engagement. Be curious to hear from any other library that's doing that.
We aren't
We've
doing,
actually, oh, I'm sorry.
this
Go
is
ahead.
Tara from Lake Villa. We aren't doing it formally, but we do, people are used to dropping in with their phones or whatever. And luckily I have one very patient staff member who works with them through the plexiglass and, you know, walks them through things, but has them touch everything on their device. So that's kind of how we're handling it, but we're not doing any kind of formal, we try to tell people that we're not really doing that, but we help them the best that we can.
We tell people that we're not going to, you know, work on their devices. We've had a man come in 3 different times now with this new Apple laptop, insisting that we help him, and we're not doing it. We suggested that we set up a Zoom tech support with him, and we would do it that way. But he keeps bringing it in, asking for help, and we're not doing it. We've had probably just in the last 2 weeks, we've probably had 6 people come in having problems downloading books, and the staff, bless their hearts, have walked people through it with the plexiglass barrier there. So everybody is kind of shouting at each other, trying to get the information across. But patrons don't seem to want to do the virtual tech help. They want somebody to do it in person and right there, which is what we used to do. So, you know, going forward, I think we're really going to have to push the virtual tech help, just because I'm getting concerned about staff spending time helping people with their devices. I mean, if Apple thinks it's not safe to do it in person, then there's no reason that the library should think it's safe to do those things in person.
I'm not sure that the online tech help will ever catch on, because the people who need that kind of tech help would also need tech help with the online tech support.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's our struggle, exactly, yes. Right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
There are a couple comments too. I was just going to read through. One question that did come through is, it would be interesting to know which of those 4 to 5 libraries that are not participating in the intra-CCS lending allow cardholders to walk in and check out material. Glencoe responded that any cardholder can come in and check out materials in building. Is there anybody at Crystal Lake, Lake Forest, Northbrook, or Evanston that can speak to whether or not you're allowing cardholders from any library to come in and check out material right now?
So I'm from Crystal Lake, and it's my understanding that we are not limiting people from using their cards in the building. Nancy, I think you're here too. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're not currently participating in the resource sharing, but if someone walks in with a card from one of our other CCS libraries, they would be able to check out, right? She's still here, or did she ditch me? Oh. So I guess don't send people on a really long drive to Crystal Lake, because I can't confirm that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that we're not requiring cards to come into the building. So I think CCS cards are still just fine to use in Crystal Lake.
Yeah, and I will say there has been a little bit of confusion about participation in intra-CCS lending versus libraries allowing reciprocal like reciprocal borrowers to pick holds up at your location. So we have a number of libraries that are participating in lending of materials, but still only allow their own patrons to place holds for pickup at their location. So if you spot, for example, maybe a Crystal Lake patron wants to pick up a hold at Fremont, you might not see Fremont as an available pickup location for your patrons because they are currently not allowing any patrons other than their own to pick up holds at their library. So in normal times, all of our libraries would participate in intra-CCS lending and all of our libraries would allow pickup anywhere. But due to COVID, governing board has suspended those requirements. So some libraries are participating in intra-CCS lending. Some libraries are not. Some libraries are letting any patron pick up holds there. Some libraries have temporarily paused that feature. So it's been quite a year, but if you do have any questions that we can help answer, just let us know.
I had one thing I wanted to share. One of my staff members in a chat was answering a patron request to renew materials or are materials overdue? And he responded, "We no longer have late fees, so you're fine, don't worry about it." However, it kind of, the finer point of the home library setting the fine rules had slipped past this person. So kind of a re-education point, maybe if you've recently gone fine free or had turned off fines during the pandemic, is that materials that go out will have fines according to their home library, not according to your library. So that caused a little bit of stickiness and is maybe worth mentioning to staff.
So the fine should be controlled by the checkout library. So if a patron checks out materials, say at Niles, then they wouldn't be charged fines because Niles is fine free. So it shouldn't necessarily be tied to the patron's home library. It should again be tied to the library they checked out the materials at.
Cindy sent me an email kind of telling me to school this person and
yeah, and maybe Ariane, we can follow up offline if you want to open a ticket with some examples. If it's not working that way, please let us know. Then we need to do some maybe fixes of the settings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then let's see, just a couple more comments here. Coming in, we also have some feedback that, again, with the tech help, just trying to, that can be done over the phone. It seems like libraries are trying to do that before in person. And then we had Melissa from Winnetka asking about Northbrook's curbside versus coming in, and Kelly from Northbrook responded that Northbrook will allow patrons with non-Northbrook cards to come in and check out materials in the building, but similar to Fremont, only Northbrook card holders can take advantage of the curbside pickup. So, okay, so I think we're all caught up. Are there any other more questions, comments in regards to reopening libraries to the public? Okay, I'm going to take that big silence as a no. Okay, so before we went into open discussion, the last thing I just wanted to mention is I have to reschedule our December meeting because I scheduled it at the same time as the UX meeting. So what I'm asking people to do, and I'll drop this into the chat here, is I'm asking folks to choose a reschedule date that works better for you. So I've gone ahead and just created a quick doodle poll. So essentially, we would either reschedule for, I'll have to fix this. We'll have to reschedule either for one day earlier, so Wednesday, December 2nd at 9:30, or Thursday, December 10th at 9:30. So go ahead and just let me know which one of those would be easier for you. I'll go ahead and share this with the past listserv, but I'd like to reschedule on a date the greatest number of people could attend. Okay, doesn't sound like there's any comment or feedback on that. Becky, did you want to close us out then?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, does anybody have anything that they, for open discussion, anything left that you needed to ask the group or anything like that? I'm gonna go with no. It seems like no. Everybody's getting hungry. Okay, so then I would look for a motion to adjourn, please.
This is Kelly from the Northbrook Public Library. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second the motion from Glencoe.
Thanks, guys. So we will go ahead and take that poll for the December meeting, and we will see you guys in a few months. Thank you.
Good job, Becky. First meeting.
My kid didn't interrupt. He came up very quietly at one point.
Jason, if you're still here, thank you for taking the meeting minutes. I appreciate it.